Hey everyone, and welcome back to the PTG Rail Routes Learning series. On today's video we're going to be taking another look at Train Sim World, and I'm going to be driving a journey on the recently released Rapid Transit add-on, which simulates Line 2 of the S-Bahn in the city of Leipzig in eastern Germany. So I'm driving in service mode, and I've set the season to autumn because I quite like the variety in the different colours of trees that you see. And I've also set the time to an early morning scenario because I quite like the way that the sun is slowly rising in the sky as we're driving along. So I've chosen a service which is the 741 Magdeburg to Markkleeberg Gashwitz station. Which actually starts where the route is simulated from in Train Sim World at Dessau Hauptbahnhof at 8:35 am, running through for 71.6 kilometers to Markkleeberg Gashwitz. We have a total of 22 stops along the way in a journey of just under 45 miles, so it's quite an intense stopping pattern, and it certainly gives you quite a lot to do when driving along. We're calling it all but one of these stations along the way. The train that I'm driving on this journey is the only train that comes with the route in the form of the BR442 Bombardier Talent 2 electric multiple unit. Being the only train that comes with the route unfortunately means that there's not really that much variety to the AI traffic pattern like you'd see in reality, and in addition to that, the traffic pattern is not actually that busy, so we won't pass that many AI trains on our journey today. So the Bombardier Talent 2 has been in service since 2011, with 367 of these units ordered or delivered, operated by Deutsche Bahn, Abellio and National Express. Each unit varies between 40 and 104 meters in length, and they have a maximum speed of 160 kilometers per hour, which is around 100 miles per hour, which we will be able to get up to on this journey today. They have a power output of 2020 kilowatts or 2710 horsepower. These units operate using the 15 kilovolt 16 and 2/3 Hz AC overhead electrification system, which is found in Germany. Now in the cab of the train, I'm just going to quickly go through the startup procedure here. So the first thing I'm going to do is press W to put the train into forward. Now that I've done that, I'm going to turn the headlights on to the dim setting. So you should see there that the outside of the train just illuminated a little bit more. And now that I've done that, I'm going to turn on the safety systems. So if I zoom in here to the computerized display in front of me, if I press Ctrl and numpad enter, now I've turned on the PZB signaling system, which I'm not going to go through in too much detail here, but I have made in Train Simulator a German signalling guide, which really goes through all of the detail of how the German signalling system works, and all of the information from that video still applies to how the system works in Train Sim World. So I will actually post a link to my German signalling guide in the description of this video. Next, now that I've done that, I need to press Shift and numpad enter to turn on the CIFA system. So now you'll see that there was a yellow light there on the computerized display just to the right that said CIFA on it. Now that's gone out, that means that the CIFA system is active, which is just an alarm that goes off to make sure that I'm still alive and alert. And I need to press the Q button to reset that alarm when it comes on. So firstly, the yellow CIFA light will come on the computerized display, and if I haven't cancelled that by pressing Q within a few seconds, then an alarm will sound on the train, and at that point I need to press Q if I haven't done already, because otherwise the emergency brakes on the train will be applied. Now I'm just going to press L to turn out the cab light here, because the cab light is defaulted to on with this train. Also in front of us you can see there the two gauges. So the one on the left is the speedometer, which is actually quite difficult to read with how far back you're sat in this train. I can actually read it on my screen, but you may find it more difficult to read in the video due to YouTube's compression affecting the video quality settings. But it's actually a digital speedometer with an analog style needle going there, as you can see, and then in addition to that there's a 0 right in the middle of it, which is actually a digital speed readout. So as our speed increases, then that number will also change. If we now move to the right here, we've got the brake gauges, and the brake cylinder pressure gauge is the one that we're most interested in, which is the top gauge. And so when that needle's pointing to 0, the air brakes are released, and when that needle climbs, then the air brakes are applied. But this train uses primarily dynamic braking, and as a result of that, you won't actually see the brake cylinder pressure gauge working that much until we come almost to a stand. So just in front of us here we have a train brake, which is an air brake, and that's actually as a separate handle to the combined traction and brake controller, which is just to our left here. And so that's currently in the neutral position, which means neither apply or release, though the brakes are fully applied while we're stopped due to the door brake interlock. So if we want to accelerate this train, then you have to push the handle away from you or use the A key on the keyboard. And this is actually not a notched power handle, so you can move it very smoothly and very precisely to get some good control of your speed. And then of course if you pull the handle towards you, then that applies the brake, and the closer that you pull it towards you, then the harder the brake's applied. Now this will control the dynamic braking, and then when we're at a very low speed, you'll notice the air braking begin to kick in, just to bring the train to a stand, as dynamic braking actually requires the train to be moving to be effective, so it can never bring the train to a complete halt. So if I now press spacebar, I can just demonstrate the horn here. And that's pretty much all of the cab controls that we need to worry about for now. I will mention a bit more about what I'm doing, of course, as we drive on towards Markkleeberg. And so now let's just take another look at the train here at Dessau Hauptbahnhof before departing and heading out on our journey on the S-Bahn towards Leipzig. Now that it's time to depart, I'm just going to close the doors by pressing the square white button to the bottom right of the screen, as you can just hear the door closing alarm there. Departing away from Dessau Hauptbahnhof, the starting speed limit is 130 km per hour. Though it will be dropping to 120 km per hour in around 1 kilometre. And we've got 4.2 kilometers to go to our first stop, which is Dessau Süd. I'm now going to press the PZB release button, which is the end key on the keyboard, as the 85 light there was flashing, which meant that we were under restricted monitoring, limiting us to 45 km per hour, or the emergency brakes would be applied. So I've just released from that now, so I can accelerate up towards the speed limit. And I'm not going to accelerate above 120 km per hour along this section. The speed limit has just dropped to 120 km per hour at the small 12 post that you saw on the ground there. With German speed limits, you should always take the speed post and times the number by 10 to get the speed that you should be travelling at. So now we're approaching 120 km per hour. I'm just reduced the power settings, and I'm going to use low power settings to try and keep our speed as close to that as possible. At the 120 km per hour speed post, we had 3.3 kilometers to go to our stop. At kilometer post 25.4 that we just passed, we had 2 kilometers to go to Dessau Süd station. And so I've got to look out in a moment for our braking points, and I'm going to try and use a medium brake setting to bring our speed down. I'm going to apply the brakes around the area of kilometer post 26.4, so we're just coming up on 26.2 now. And now that we've reached kilometer post 26.4, I've now got the brakes on in a medium setting to bring our speed down. I will increase the braking if required as we get closer to our stop here. So here at this stop I'm aiming to stop just before the overhead gantry just coming up, halfway along the platform. And that should be roughly the correct stopping point. Departing Dessau Süd, the starting speed limit is 120 km per hour, and with 11 km to go to our next stop at Raccoon, this is the longest distance between any two stops that we will encounter on this journey. As we now approach 120 km per hour, I'm just going to reduce the power to try and maintain the speed using lower power settings. We are currently on a 1 in 200 climbing gradient, however, which will affect our speed slightly, and so I will need a little bit more power than usual. But I do need to look out for when the gradient levels out, because then the train will start accelerating, and it's quite easy to inadvertently break the speed limit. This section of the route is unfortunately one of a couple of sections where it's very difficult to get a stable 30 frames per second, and so the frame rate you're seeing will be dropping here between 30 and sort of 24-25 frames per second. Most of the route I can get an average of 45, though I do lock the frame rate to 30 frames per second when recording. In anticipation for the question arising, especially for those who haven't watched this channel before, the PC that I'm running this route on, the specifications, I have an Intel Core i7 4790K processor with 16 gigabytes of DDR3 1833 MHz RAM, and the graphics card is an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 980 with 4 gigabytes of RAM. As we approach kilometre post 34, we've then got 4 kilometres to go to our stop, and we're now approaching Markkleeberg station, the only station we don't stop at on this journey. Now at kilometre post 36, we have 2 kilometres to go to Raccoon station. I'm aiming to apply the brakes as we reach the next signal. I've now got the brakes in a medium brake setting, which is bringing our speed down quite nicely. I just reduced the braking momentarily as I felt that we might be slowing down a bit too early. You can now see the platforms coming up just ahead. Here at Raccoon, I need to aim to stop at the end of the platform. So this should be about the right place to stop. Departing Raccoon, the starting speed limit is 120 km per hour, with 2 km to go to an upcoming 70 km per hour speed restriction, and 2.9 km to go to our next stop, which is Jesnitz. We've now reached the warning post for the upcoming 70 km per hour speed restriction, and so I had to acknowledge the PZB at that warning post, and now I have to get the train below 85 km per hour within 23 seconds, or the emergency brakes will be applied. So I'm now down below 85 km per hour. I'm just continuing to slow down for the upcoming 70 km per hour speed limit, though I am going to have slowed down a bit too early here. I just wanted to make sure that the emergency brakes didn't get applied if I hadn't slowed down quickly enough. So I'm now down to 70 km per hour and just allowing the train to coast at this speed. We're now entering the 70 km per hour speed zone. I'm going to brake in a moment just as we get a bit closer to the platform, which you can see coming up just ahead. I've just come in there with some very gentle brakes. I've now released the brakes for a moment, just until we enter the platform. This is a platform with a stopping point where you really don't want to be entering at faster than around 40 km per hour, which is around 25 miles per hour. And here I need to stop just past the footbridge that you can see coming up just ahead. And so this should be just about the right place to stop. Departing Jesnitz, the starting speed limit is 70 km per hour, with around 2.4 km to go to our next stop, which is Wolfen. The speed limit is now going back up to 120 km per hour. The speed limit's just gone up to 140 km per hour with 1.1 km to go to our stop. And so now I've just idled the power and started applying the brakes here, just at these crossover points. I've got the brakes on in a medium setting, which should bring our speed down quite nicely. And so here at Wolfen station, I need to stop just as the shelter to the right hand side there disappears, which is a shelter for the stairs which go down into the subway under the station. Should be just about the right place to stop. Departing Wolfen, the starting speed limit is 140 km per hour, with 2.2 km to go to our next stop at Greppin, and 1 km to go to an upcoming 120 km per hour speed limit. The speed limit's just dropped to 120 km per hour, and I'm now going to idle the power at this point. We had 1.1 km to go at the 120 km per hour speed post, and now that we've just passed kilometre post 44.8, I've now got the brakes on in a medium setting to bring our speed down. This should hopefully be roughly the correct brake force required. Here at Greppin station, I'm going to stop just before the kilometre post, which is in the platform, which is kilometre post 43.8. Departing Greppin, the starting speed limit is 120 km per hour, with 2.6 kilometers to go to an upcoming 60 km/h speed limit, and 2.8 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is Bitterfeld. As we reach 120 km/h, I'm now just going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast at this point. I'm going to prepare soon to slow down for the upcoming 60 km/h speed restriction. And so we're now going to take a right curve where we split away from the track to our left for a moment. And at this signal just here, I'm now going to start applying the brakes in a medium setting to bring our speed down to 60. The 60 km/h speed restriction comes into force just after the overbridge, coming up just ahead. I'm now just going to allow the train to coast at 60 km/h, and we'll be entering the platform in a moment. And here at Bitterfeld, I need to stop just before the end of the roof. And this should be roughly the correct place to stop. Departing Bitterfeld, the starting speed limit is 120 km/h, with 6.2 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is Rudder. As soon as we've crossed this junction here and crossed onto the track to our left, the speed limit is now going up to 200 km/h or 125 miles per hour. However, we're not permitted to travel at that speed, as in Germany, to travel at speeds of above 165 km/h, you need to be able to use the LZB signalling system, which this train is not equipped with, so our maximum permitted speed is 160 km/h. At this signal just here, we've now got 4.9 kilometers to go to our next stop. The tracks here are going to split for a moment, and at this point we're about to start on a steep 1 in 56 climb, which will affect our acceleration. We're now on a short downward gradient, so I'm just going to cut the power for a moment to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. And now at this signal, just after the tracks have rejoined here, we've now got around 2 kilometres to go to our stop. I'm just going to coast the power at this point. I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment. At kilometre post 51.8. Our speed here is coming off quite nicely. I'm just trying to look out for the platform ahead. I may have braked slightly too early. I can now see the platform coming up on the right hand side. And here I'm aiming to stop around the area of kilometre post 53 just to our right, which should be roughly the correct stopping point for this length of train. Departing Rudder, the starting speed limit is still 160 km per hour for this train, with 6.6 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is Dessau. As we get towards 160 km per hour, I'm then going to go between low and mid power settings to try and maintain the speed as close to that as possible. We're now approaching kilometre post 58 with 2 kilometres to go to our stop. At this point I'm going to idle the power to allow the train to coast. I'm going to apply the brakes between kilometre post 58.6 and 58.8. We've just passed kilometre post 58.6 and have now got the brakes on into a mid-high brake setting just to bring our speed down, and then I will adjust the brake settings as we get closer to Dessau station. just increase the braking as I could see the platform is coming up quite fast. And now I'm reducing the braking as we get closer to the platform. Here at Dessau station, I'm aiming to stop as a signal on the left hand side, you can just see there, which is a red signal for the track to our left. I'm aiming to stop just as that signal disappears. And so this should be just about the right place to stop. Departing Dessau, the starting speed limit is still 160 km per hour. With 4.7 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is Schortau. Now at kilometre post 62, we've got 2.7 kilometres to go to Schortau. I'm going to idle the power at kilometre post 63, which is coming up in a moment. And I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop between kilometre post 63.8 and 64. I've now got the brakes in a fairly high setting to bring our speed down. The platform is coming up fairly quickly, though I should be able to reduce the braking in a moment as we get a bit closer to the platform here. At this station, I'm aiming to stop around the area of the platform 1 sign, which is coming up in a moment, just after the kilometre post you can see there on the right. So if I stop just as the 1 sign disappears, then that should be about the right place to stop. Departing Schortau, the starting speed limit is still 160 km per hour, with 4.8 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is Rackwitz. I'm going to idle the power now as we approach kilometre post 68.2 with 2 kilometres to go to Rackwitz station. Now going to apply the brakes to a medium setting as we reach kilometre post 69 just there. Just thought I was slowing down a little bit too early. I can now see the platform coming up ahead. So I'll just reduce the braking for a moment until we get closer to the platform. Definitely slowed down a bit too early there, as we're now doing around 42 kilometers per hour, and we could probably safely enter the platform at around 40 kilometers per hour. Here at Rackwitz, I'm aiming to stop halfway along the platform, just as the platform sign disappears on the right hand side. You can just see the platform there halfway along, should I say the platform sign there halfway along, and now we're roughly in the right place to stop. Departing Rackwitz, the speed limit is still 160 km per hour, with 2.4 km to go until all trains will be limited to 160 km per hour, so the 200 km per hour speed zone will end at that point, and 5 km to go to our next stop, which is Leipzig Messe. The speed limit from this point is now 160 km per hour for all trains, and we've got 2.7 km to go to our stop. At kilometre post 73, I'm now going to shut off the power. I'm just going to apply the brakes to slow us down to 120 km per hour, because for some reason there is a short speed drop down to 120. Without much warning at all, and certainly with no speed post that I've actually been able to see. So I'm not going to go above 120 km per hour at this point, and I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop as we reach kilometre post 74. So I've now got the brakes on for Leipzig Messe station. I have slowed down just slightly too early once again, so I'll just release the brakes momentarily until we get a bit closer to the platform, which you can see coming up just ahead. Here at Leipzig Messe station, I'm aiming to stop around halfway along the platform roof here. Just after the signal disappears on the right hand side, and this should be roughly the correct stopping point for this train. Departing Leipzig Messe, the starting speed limit is 160 km per hour, with 1 km to go to a speed drop down to 120 km per hour, and 3.7 km to go to our next stop, which is Leipzig Nord. The speed limit has now dropped to 120 km per hour, with 2.7 km to go to our stop. And now that we've reached 120 km per hour, I've just shut off the power at this point to allow the train to coast. We have just had a warning for an upcoming 100 km per hour speed restriction, which will be coming into force shortly after the next signal. And so I'm just going to apply the brakes lightly to bring our speed down to that, just after we've passed the next signal just coming up. So now I've got the brakes on lightly, just to bring our speed down in time. We're now down to 100 km per hour. And we're just about to cross a junction here, and then immediately afterwards we're going to be going down 1 in 50, which will cause us to accelerate. So I've just got the brakes on lightly now to ensure that the train doesn't roll away with us. And then as soon as we've reached the bottom of this hill, I'm going to put the brakes on quite hard to ensure that we slow down in time for our stop at Leipzig Nord station. So I've now got the brakes on. It's bringing our speed down quite nicely. The platform is on this sharp right curve, and you can't really see it until it creeps up on you. And in practice runs on this journey, I've actually overshot it a couple of times while trying to make this video. Here at Leipzig Nord, we need to stop at the end of the platform. And so this should be just about the right place to stop.
Bitte achten Sie.
Departing Leipzig Nord, the speed limit is currently 100 km per hour. And we've got a signal just there warning us of an upcoming 80 km per hour speed restriction, with 2.6 km to go to our next stop, which is Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. So at present I'm going to accelerate up towards 100 km per hour, and then I'm going to brake for the upcoming 80 km/h speed restriction as I reach the next signal. So just come up on the signal now. I'm now going to apply the brakes for the upcoming 80. Now need to slow down to 60 km/h for the upcoming signal that you can see. And this isn't actually marked on the HUD, so you've got to be very careful here to ensure that you don't end up breaking the speed limit. The speed limit is now going back up to 80 km/h entering this tunnel here, and you can see the main station just above, so we're diving now into an underground platform. And as we enter the tunnel here, we're now on a steep downward gradient, and as a result of that we're accelerating quite quickly. I may need to use the brakes to control our speed as we approach 80 km/h. I haven't used any power to accelerate at this point. I just slipped up, I think there, just to 81, maybe 82 km/h for a moment, which wasn't intentional. Now I've got the brakes on, as you can see the platform here. I'm braking quite hard at this point. And for the next few stations now, it's more like we're actually on an underground metro rather than a mainline railway. So I need to stop around the area of the B sign to our left, and we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing Leipzig Hauptbahnhof, the starting speed limit is 80 km/h, with 570 meters to go to our next stop, which is Leipzig Markt. As we now approach 65 km/h, I'm just going to shut off the power now and allow the train to coast, and I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop, just as we see the platform lights, which you can now see coming up just here. Once again, I'm going to brake quite hard. I'm treating this more like an underground train at this point. Due to the close proximity of the stations, you really want quite fast acceleration and braking. And here at Leipzig Markt, I'm aiming to stop just as the escalators there just disappear, so you should now be stopped in about the right place. Departing Leipzig Markt, the starting speed limit is still 80 km/h, with 650 meters to go to our next stop, which is Leipzig Wilhelm-Leuschner-Platz. We're now going to idle the power as we approach 70 km/h, and we're going to apply the brakes in a moment just before we enter the platform here. And once again at this station, I'm aiming to stop just after the bottom of the escalators. And we should once again be in the correct place to stop. Departing Leipzig Wilhelm-Leuschner-Platz, the starting speed limit is still 80 km/h, with 775 meters to go to our next stop, which is Leipzig Bayerischer Bahnhof. I'm now going to shut off the power just before reaching 80 kilometers per hour, and I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just as we enter this right-hand curve here. I'm going to brake quite hard now to try and ensure that I bring our speed down in time. Here at Leipzig S-Bahn, I need to aim to stop by the platform 1 sign, which is coming up in a moment towards the stairs at the other end of the platform. So I have slowed down a bit too early here, and I'm just going to coast towards that stopping point. So just after the 1 has disappeared there on the left hand side, just before the stairs, this should now be the correct place to stop. Departing away from Leipzig S-Bahn, the starting speed limit is 80 km per hour, with 1.1 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is listed simply in the game as Leipzig MDR, so I'm not quite sure what the MDR stands for. As we now head towards the tunnel exit here, we're going to be on a 1 in 53 upward gradient, which will affect our acceleration. We've now finished the climb, and so at this point I'm now going to reduce the power to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just past this signal here for our stop. See the platforms coming up just ahead at Leipzig MDR station. And so I'm going to stop in a moment just as the platform sign, which is on the wall to our right, you can see just there, but just after that's disappeared, that should be about the right place to stop. Departing Leipzig MDR, the speed limit is currently 80 km per hour, with 2.1 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is Leipzig Konnewitz. The speed limit is now going back up to 120 km per hour. I'm not quite sure what's happened here, but this happened on a practice run earlier, in that for a moment the power actually cut out on the train, and then somehow I was able to get the power back again, but I'm not quite sure how I managed it. And so the power has now come back. I'm not quite sure if that was a neutral section or something, or if it was just a slight bug with the route, but the power is now back and I'm able to accelerate once again. I'm now idling the power at kilometre post 2.4 there, and I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop around kilometre post 2.6 to 2.8. So just past 2.6. And I'm braking quite lightly for our stop here. I'm going slightly slower than I originally would have been due to the power cut off there. I can now see the platforms here coming up at Leipzig Konnewitz station. So if I pull up in a moment around the area of this shelter just coming up on the right hand side, that should be the correct place to stop. Departing Leipzig Konowitz, the starting speed limit is 120 km per hour, with 1.8 km to go to our next stop, which is Markkleeberg Nord. I've now idled the power just to allow the train to coast. I'm now going to apply the brakes for our stop just as we enter these green sound barriers here. So as soon as you see that barrier on the right and left hand side, you know that should be roughly the correct point to apply the brakes. You can now see the platform coming up just ahead at Markkleeberg Nord station. And here at Markkleeberg Nord, I need to stop at the end of the platform. And so this should be roughly the correct place to stop. Departing Markkleeberg Nord, the starting speed limit is 120 km per hour, with 940 meters to go to our next stop, which is Markkleeberg. As we approach 80 km per hour, I'm now just going to idle the power here at this point to allow the train to coast. And I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment as we get closer to the platform, which I can see just coming up there on the left hand side. So I've just got the brakes on now to bring our speed down. So we're entering the platform there at just below 40 km per hour, which is roughly the correct speed. And I'm aiming to stop here just around the area of the kilometre post, which is just coming up on the right hand side. But just as kilometre post 6 disappears, this should now be roughly the correct place to stop. Departing away from Markkleeberg, the speed limit is still 120 km per hour, with 1.9 km to go to our next stop, which is Markkleeberg Großstadtelm. I'm going to idle the power now at just over 100 kilometers per hour. I'm going to start applying the brakes for our stop at a 200 meter distance marker, which will be coming up in a moment on the right hand side. So we've now got the 300 meter distance marker and now the 200 meter marker, which is for the upcoming signal just here. Here at Markkleeberg Großstadtelm, I need to stop at the end of the platform. We've now arrived at Markkleeberg Großstadtelm, where unfortunately I've had to end the journey one stop early due to a fault with the train dispatcher putting a train in front of me into the platform at the end destination of Markkleeberg Gasfitz, which didn't happen in the practice run, so I'm not quite sure why that is. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you did enjoy it. It's a shame that we couldn't quite make it to the final stop, but it's only 1.5 kilometers that we've missed out on in the end. I'm hoping to do a video on this route again in the future, perhaps in the other direction, so that we can hopefully manage to cover that final 1.5 kilometers. For the latest channel updates, please don't forget that you can find me on Facebook with the link to my Facebook page in the description of this video. And also, if you'd like to sponsor this channel, then please visit my Patreon page for more information. And again, the link to that is in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.